Almost every day, millions of people use bridges, tunnels, buildings, and other man-made structures without even thinking about how safe they really are. Of course, we tend to be very confident because at first glance these structures look sturdy, they seem permanent, and it feels impossible for them to collapse. But if we look back at history, we can really prove that not everything that looks strong is truly strong. Because sometimes, even some of the most expensive, most modern, and most well-known projects in the world can still cause tragedy if there is even a small mistake in design, construction, or maintenance. That's why in this video, we'll look at some of the biggest engineering failures in history. We'll discuss bridges that suddenly collapsed in the middle of traffic, buildings that fell down, and projects worth billions of dollars that ended up in disaster. In fact, it's often because of trying to save time or money. As a result, it led to the loss of lives and destruction of the environment. But before we start the discussion, I'd like to ask you for a like and please subscribe to our channel. This is a huge help for us content creators. So let's get started. Let's begin with the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. In 1940, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge was opened in Washington State. At that time, it was one of the longest suspension bridges in the world. Many people were amazed by its elegant design and believed that it was a great engineering achievement. But most people didn't know that it was already showing problems, even before the construction was fully completed. When the wind was strong, the bridge noticeably swayed. It was like a giant trampoline moving up and down. Because of this, it was even given the nickname Galloping Gertie. Instead of taking the warning seriously, people continued to use the bridge. One of the main reasons for this was money. There was an earlier design for the bridge that was stronger and safer. However, it was more expensive. So during the Great Depression, when many projects were cutting costs, officials chose the cheaper design. According to reports about the project, millions of dollars were saved with the chosen plan. But later on, the consequences were even greater. To reduce the cost and weight of the bridge, the designers used a thinner structure compared to what was commonly used at that time. Because of this, the bridge became more sensitive to the effects of the wind. In other words, it couldn't adequately control its movement when hit by strong gusts of wind. And when November 7, 1940 came, there was no storm, and the wind wasn't even that strong. But as the wind blew over the bridge, it started to sway more strongly than before. The twisting and bending of the bridge's roadway gradually got worse. It was as if a giant hand was twisting it in opposite directions. One of the witnesses at that time was Leonard Coatsworth, a journalist who was on the bridge with his child's dog. As the movement of the bridge got worse, he was forced to leave his car and run away to save himself. He survived. But the dog was left inside the car because of extreme fear. Moments later, the middle part of the bridge completely collapsed. It fell into the water below as people watched in disbelief at what was happening. Even more shocking, it was not caused by an earthquake. It was also not due to an explosion or a collision. The main reason was the unusual effect of the wind on the bridge's design. Engineers call this aeroelastic flutter. It's like the wind repeatedly pushing against something until its movement grows bigger and bigger. When it reaches the point where the structure can no longer withstand the force, it can collapse. And that's exactly what happened to the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Although there were not many fatalities in this incident, it became a huge lesson for the entire engineering world. Since then, many countries have changed the way they design long bridges. Now, before a major bridge project is approved, it is usually subjected to wind tunnel testing. Engineers create models first. They make a small model of the bridge and place it in a special facility where different wind strengths and directions are simulated. The goal is to immediately identify any design weaknesses before the actual structure is built. In 1950, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge was replaced with a new version that had a stronger design and better protection against the effects of the wind. To this day, the collapse of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge remains one of the most important lessons in the history of Indonesia, because sometimes it's not enough for a project to just look good. Saving on costs is not enough either. If the design is wrong, Even a massive bridge made of steel and concrete can collapse in just a few minutes. Now let's talk about the Hyatt Regency Hotel. On July 17, 1981, it was a joyful night at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri. More than 1,600 people gathered at the hotel for a dance event. There were families, there were couples, there were friends who just wanted to enjoy the night. No one knew that in just a few seconds everything would turn into a tragedy. While the celebration was ongoing, suddenly there was a loud metallic sound. This was followed by a very loud crash. One of the elevated walkways inside the hotel gave way, and before people could even react, another walkway below it also collapsed. Almost 60 tons of steel, concrete, and other materials fell on the people below. In just a few seconds, more than 100 people died, and hundreds more were injured. According to investigations after the disaster, it was not caused by an earthquake. It was also not due to an explosion, and it was not because of overcrowding. The real reason was a mistake in the design of the walkway supports. To better understand this, let's think of a hanging swing. If the rope of the swing is strong enough, it can carry one person. But what if you suddenly add the weight of another person to the same rope which wasn't designed for that? It could possibly snap. That's what happened at the Hyatt Regency. In the original plan, the two walkways were supposed to have their own support from the ceiling. That means they would each carry their own weight separately. But during the construction of the project, there was a change in the design. In the new method, the upper walkway was still suspended from the ceiling, but the lower walkway was hung from the upper walkway. Because of this, the support for the upper walkway no longer carried just its own weight. The weight of the lower walkway was also transferred to it. In other words, the force that the connections and bolts had to carry almost doubled, and that was the big problem. On paper, the change seemed small, but in real life, its effect was huge. As time passed, those supports carried a weight far beyond what they could bear, enduring it, until the night finally came when they gave way completely. When the upper walkway collapsed, it also pulled down the lower walkway. It was like dominoes falling one after another. After the tragic disaster, the authorities conducted a thorough investigation. They discovered that the main reason for the collapse was the change in the design. Many engineers have called this one of the biggest mistakes in structural engineering in the 20th century. There was also a major lawsuit against the companies involved in the project. Millions of dollars were paid as compensation to the victims and their families. More importantly, this incident changed many engineering standards in America. Design reviews became stricter. Any construction changes were approved more carefully, because this tragedy showed that sometimes the whole building doesn't need to collapse for a disaster to happen. Sometimes one wrong decision, one change in the plan, and one support that wasn't properly checked are enough to cause a tragedy that hundreds of families will never forget. Next on our list is the Seongsu Bridge collapse. Sometimes a bridge doesn't collapse right away. Before a disaster happens, there are warnings, there are cracks, there are complaints, there are signs that something is wrong. But if these are ignored, it can lead to tragedy. That's what happened in the Seongsu Bridge collapse. In Seoul, South Korea, this bridge was opened in 1979 and crosses the Han River. It's important because thousands of vehicles pass through it every day. But by 1994, the bridge was already being used too heavily. According to investigations, almost twice as many vehicles were passing through compared to its original design. Aside from that, there were also heavy trucks that regularly used the bridge. As the years went by, some parts of the structure gradually became worn out. On October 20, 1994, workers noticed a problem in one part of the bridge. Instead of immediately closing the area, they covered it with steel while waiting for repairs. The next day, a motorist was surprised to see a crack, but it was not addressed immediately. Just a few hours later, tragedy struck. Suddenly, a part of the bridge collapsed. Several vehicles and a passenger bus fell along with it. In just a few seconds, a large part of the bridge collapsed into the river. 32 people died. Many others were injured. The investigation revealed that there were problems with the construction, Maintenance and inspection of the bridge. There were parts that should have been fixed earlier. There were warnings that were not acted upon immediately. And when all those problems came together, the structure finally gave way. After the disaster, the South Korean government conducted a widespread inspection of bridges and buildings across the country. Many structures needed to be repaired. There were also some officials and people involved in the project who faced charges. The Seongsu Bridge was rebuilt and reopened after a few years. But until now, it remains a reminder that even a bridge that looks sturdy can collapse when warnings are ignored. Next on our list is the Sampoong department store collapse. In 1995, one of the worst engineering disasters in modern history shook South Korea. And this time, it wasn't a bridge that collapsed, but a huge department store. In the middle of the Gangnam district in Seoul, the Sampoong department store once stood. It was one of the biggest shopping centers in the country. Every day, thousands of people shopped here. From the outside, it looked sturdy and safe. But inside, there were problems that had been hidden for a long time. What's more concerning is that some people already knew about those problems. At first, the plan wasn't really to build a department store in that place. The original design was for an office building. But while the project was being built, the plan was changed. The building was turned into a department store. Additional floors were added. Some supporting parts were changed. Some columns were made smaller. Some were also removed to create more space inside. In short, the weight of the building increased, while the strength of some of its parts decreased. At first, it seemed manageable, but as time went by, the danger grew. A few years before the disaster, cracks began to appear in some parts of the building. As time passed, the cracks increased even more. On June 29, 1995, the cracks on the 5th floor widened further. Some employees were worried. There were also people who noticed strange sounds and movements, but the entire building was not immediately evacuated. Many people continued shopping inside. In the afternoon, the most feared thing happened. The main supports of the building suddenly gave way. In less than half a minute, a large part of the department store collapsed. More than 500 people died. Almost 1,000 more were injured. This is one of the worst building collapses in modern history. In the investigation, it was revealed that the main cause of the tragedy was a series of poor decisions in the design, construction, and management of the building. There were changes that should not have been made. There were warnings that should not have been ignored, and there were problems that should have been fixed before they got worse. Until now, the collapse of the Sampoong department store remains a major reminder that in engineering, safety cannot be set aside in exchange for greater profit or faster construction. And now let's move on to the Prestige oil spill disaster. Not all engineering disasters are collapsing bridges or buildings. Sometimes the victim is not people, but nature. On November 13, 2002, an old oil tanker was sailing near the coast of Spain. Its name was MV Prestige. It was carrying a huge amount of fuel oil. While in the middle of bad weather, the ship started to have serious problems. Damage appeared on the body of the vessel and oil started to leak. The captain asked for help. He wanted to enter the nearest port to carry out emergency repairs. But according to reports and the official investigation, some countries were afraid that the oil spill might get worse if the ship was allowed to approach their shores. Because of this, it was not immediately allowed to enter nearby ports. Instead, it remained at sea while its condition worsened. While being battered by strong waves, the structure weakened even more. After a few days, it finally broke in half. After that, the ship sank. At the same time, a huge amount of oil leaked into the ocean. The result was one of the worst environmental disasters in European history. Thousands of kilometers of coastline were affected. The beaches were polluted. Countless birds, fish, and other marine life died. Many fishermen also lost their livelihoods because of the extent of the contamination. In the investigation, it was revealed that the ship was old, and there were previous reports about its condition even before the disaster happened. The decisions made as the crisis worsened also became the center of debate. Many experts argued whether it would have been better if the ship had been allowed to dock immediately so that repairs could be carried out. Until now, the MV Prestige disaster remains one of the biggest reminders of how great the impact of a single repair can be. Mistakes in engineering and management, because when oil spills into the sea, it's not just one ship that's lost. Even animals' livelihoods and entire ecosystems can be affected for many years. Now let's talk about the Big Dig tunnel collapse. What if a project designed to make people's travel safer ends up causing a tragedy? That's what happened in Boston, Massachusetts. For many decades, one of the city's biggest problems was severe traffic. Every day, vehicles crowded the main roads. So the authorities decided to undertake a massive project. They called it the Big Dig. The plan was to move some of the city's most important highways underground to reduce surface traffic. The project began in the early 1990s. It was expected to be completed within a few years, but as time went on, it kept getting bigger and more expensive. The total cost reached billions of dollars. Despite this, it was still considered one of the largest infrastructure projects in American history. But on July 10, 2006, something unexpected happened. While a vehicle was passing through the tunnel, a huge concrete panel suddenly fell from the ceiling. It was estimated to weigh about 26 tons. It hit the vehicle below directly. A woman died while her husband, who was driving, survived. After the incident, authorities conducted a thorough investigation. It was discovered that the problem was in the system of attaching some concrete panels to the ceiling of the tunnel. There were parts that relied on special adhesive or epoxy to stay attached. But according to investigators' reports, the material used was not strong enough to support the weight over a long period of time. As the years went by, its hold gradually weakened until it finally gave way. Because of this, the authorities were forced to conduct a thorough inspection of the entire tunnel system. Many sections needed to be reinforced and repaired. There were also hefty fines and legal cases filed against some of the companies involved in the project. To this day, the Big Dig remains an important lesson because it showed that no matter how big or expensive a project is, even a small part can cause huge problems if it is not thoroughly inspected. Now let's talk about the Deepwater Horizon disaster. There are engineering disasters that immediately take lives, but there are others that destroy not only lives, but also the entire environment. One of the biggest examples of this happened in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. In the middle of the sea, there was a huge drilling platform called Deepwater Horizon. It was owned by Transocean and used by BP to search for and extract oil from beneath the ocean. This was not an ordinary oil rig. It was one of the most advanced drilling platforms of its time. It was capable of operating in extremely deep parts of the ocean and drilling several miles down beneath the seabed. For many years, it successfully drilled oil wells. In fact, it was even recognized back then for its excellent record. But in 2010, everything changed. Deepwater Horizon was sent to the Macondo oil field, a place with a massive oil deposit. The problem is, it was also one of the most difficult and dangerous places to drill. As the drilling goes deeper, the pressure underground also increases. It's like a bottle of soft drink that's been shaken for a long time. If it's opened the wrong way, its contents could explode. That's why it's very important to properly seal the well, using cement and other safety systems. But according to investigations by authorities in the United States, there was a series of mistakes in the project. There were decisions made to save time and costs. There were warnings from some staff and engineers that were not given enough attention. And there were signs that there was a problem inside the well. On April 20, 2010, tragedy struck. Natural gas suddenly rose from underground. The pressure was extremely strong. The gas entered the drilling platform, and in just a short while, there was a massive explosion. This was followed by an intense fire. 11 workers died. Many others were injured. After burning for almost 2 days, the entire platform sank into the sea. But the disaster did not end there. When the Deepwater Horizon sank, oil continued to leak from the damaged well beneath the sea. Every day, thousands of barrels of oil spread into the ocean. The thick oil gradually spread over a large part of the Gulf of Mexico. The birds are covered in oil. Fish, dolphins, and other sea creatures are also affected. Many coastlines have been polluted. The livelihood of fishermen and the tourism businesses in nearby areas are also affected. Companies and authorities tried different methods to stop the leak. Special caps were placed on the well. Chemicals were used to reduce the spread of oil. However, the initial attempts were not immediately successful. It took almost 87 days before the leak was finally brought under control. According to official reports from the United States government, millions of barrels of oil spread into the sea before the well was finally sealed. This is considered one of the worst environmental disasters in American history. After the investigation, it was revealed that the disaster was not caused by a single mistake. It was the result of a series of wrong decisions, lack of safety measures, and warnings that were not acted upon immediately. BP paid billions of dollars in fines, compensation, and environmental restoration programs. Until now, the Deepwater Horizon disaster is still being studied in engineering and safety courses around the world because it showed that when safety is set aside in favor of speed, cost-cutting, or production, not just one project can be destroyed. Even the sea, the environment, and the livelihood of millions of people can be affected for many years. Now let's talk about the I-35W bridge collapse. On August 1, 2007, it was rush hour in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The I-35W bridge was full of vehicles. There were cars, trucks, construction materials, and a school bus carrying children. It was supposed to be just normal traffic. But at around 6:05 in the evening, the bridge suddenly gave way. Within seconds, a large part of it collapsed into the Mississippi River. Many vehicles fell along with the steel and concrete. 13 people died. More than 140 were injured. In the NTSB investigation, it was found that the main problem was with the gusset plates. Gusset plates are like large pieces of steel that connect parts of the bridge. If this part is weak, the whole bridge can become weak. In the case of the I-35W bridge, there were plates that were too thin from the original design. Over time, the weight of the bridge increased because of modifications and repairs. On the day it collapsed, there was traffic and heavy construction materials on top. This means the heavy load combined with the bridge's weak point, and the weak section gave way first. After that, the other parts collapsed one after another. The bridge, which thousands of people cross every day, collapsed in the middle of rush hour. The lesson here is simple. Just because a bridge has been standing for a long time doesn't mean it's still safe. It needs to be inspected regularly. It's also important to understand which parts are truly weak, because sometimes a single thin piece of steel can end up carrying the full load that leads to disaster. Now let's move on to the Morandi bridge collapse. On August 14, 2018, it was raining heavily in Genoa, Italy. In the middle of the bad weather, a large section of the Morandi bridge suddenly collapsed. This bridge was not an ordinary bridge. It passed over houses, roads, train tracks, and a river. For a long time, it was considered a symbol of engineering in Italy. But behind its sturdy appearance, there was a problem that had been getting worse for a long time. The Morandi bridge had a unique design. It had cables encased in concrete. It looked impressive, but there was one big problem. When the cables are inside the concrete, it's hard to see if they're rusting. And because Genoa is close to the sea, there's always salt in the air. There's also pollution from the surroundings. Over time, water and salt can seep into the concrete. When it reaches the steel, rust starts to form. And when the steel rusts, its grip weakens. According to investigations and reports, there have long been concerns about the condition of the bridge. Repairs had been carried out over the years, but these were not enough to prevent the eventual collapse. When a part of the bridge gave way and vehicles passing over it fell, 43 people died. Many families lost their loved ones. There were also houses and buildings around that were damaged. After the disaster, what happened raised major questions in Italy. How did a bridge they had long been proud of collapse? How was the danger not prevented? If there had already been warning signs, the Morandi Bridge became a reminder to the whole world. Even if the builder is famous, even if the design is beautiful, even if it has been used for a long time, if maintenance is lacking and warnings are not taken seriously, a symbol of progress can collapse in just a few seconds.